Welcome to this presentation of Saunders Aircraft, Gimli's other big aviation story. This presentation was made at the Canadian Aviation Historical Society convention in Winnipeg on September 29, 2022. Of course, we know about this other big Gimli aviation story from July 1983. This Gimli glider event took 30 minutes to unfold and brought everlasting fame to Gimli. But we're not talking about that glider story today. Today's talk is about an aircraft company located in Gimli that built commuter aircraft. Saunders Aircraft and Gimli were front page news in their day. Not a huge headline as the other Gimli aviation story, but on September 23, 1970, the Winnipeg Free Press runs this small front page story, Aircraft Company Eyes Gimli. Dave Saunders started Saunders Aircraft. Dave Saunders is not related to the large UK aviation firm of Saunders Roe. Some of you may recognize the Dave Saunders name from the Saunders strap, a wing spar modification developed by Dave Saunders to prevent wing spar failures on certain Beech aircraft. Dave Saunders was born in the UK in 1934. After finishing high school, Dave apprentices as an aeronautical engineer at de Havilland Aircraft from 1950 to 1954. While at de Havilland Aircraft, Dave works on the de Havilland Heron and the Comet aircraft. 1955, Dave Saunders immigrates to Canada to work on the Arrow jet fighter program. Dave leaves Arrow in 1958 before the Arrow program is shut down. Dave goes out on his own as an aviation consultant. In 1960, Dave joins the RCAF full-time. Dave takes his instrument training on T-33 jets at CFB Gimli. Dave then gets assigned to CFB Bagville and flies the Arrow CF-100 jet interceptor. Dave leaves the RCAF in 1963 and works for Aircraft Industries of Canada at Saint John, Quebec, located southeast of Montreal. Aircraft Industries is an aircraft modification and maintenance company, and Dave eventually becomes their chief engineer. Dave designs a four-place low-wing airplane called the Super Cheetah, which first flew in September 1964. However, Dave is unable to get financing to put the Super Cheetah into production. Around the same time in Montreal, United Aircraft of Canada, later to be renamed Pratt & Whitney Canada, develops a lightweight and powerful PT6 turboprop engine. The engine is first tested on the nose of a Beech 18 aircraft. Aircraft designers are now looking at turboprop engines like the PT6 to power their new aircraft designs. One such new aircraft design with PT6 engines is the Beechcraft 99, carrying 15 passengers. Dave Saunders is reviewing the Beech 99 specs for a Quebec aviation company. Dave finds the Beech 99 specs short on his client's needs and thinks he has a better solution. A de Havilland Heron with a pair of PT6 20-27 engines. Dave thinks that stretching the Heron fuselage would help balance the plane with the lighter turboprop engines and add room for at least 5 more seats. Replacing the Ford Gypsy engines with turboprops would also shave off 500 pounds of weight. A bit of background on de Havilland Heron and Dove. The Dove is on the left and Heron is on the right. The twin-engine Dove first flew on September 25, 1945, and would carry 8 to 11 passengers. 540 Doves were built. The Heron was a follow-up to the Dove, and first flew on May 10, 1950. Some Dove parts were common to the Heron. The Heron was powered by 4 de Havilland Gypsy Queen engines of 250 horsepower each. 149 Herons were built. 51 were Mark 1s that had fixed landing gear, and 98 were Mark 2s that had retractable landing gear. Dave gets conceptual drawings done up of a stretched Heron and hits the Montreal streets to drum up financing. It is 1967, Canada's centennial year, and the economy is doing good. And one day, Dave was able to raise $500,000. Dave would raise $1 million in total and incorporate Saunders Aircraft on May 1968. Dave names his new aircraft the Saunders ST-27, ST for Saunders Transport, and 27 for up to 27 seats. Saunders hires aviation traders in the UK to do the engineering for the ST-27 conversion and fabricate the conversion parts. ATAL will also direct the process to obtain the British type certificate for the ST-27. ATAL is a division of Aviation Traders Limited, best known for the DC-4 conversion into the ATL-98 Carvair, which was used to ferry autos over the English Channel. ATL was owned by Freddie Laker. Some of you may remember Laker Airways. In January 1969, Saunders Aircraft buys a used Heron for $40,000. Saunders rents hangar space from Atlantic Aviation at Dorval Airport, and the Heron to ST-27 conversion begins. You can see the 4-foot fuselage extensions in yellow zinc chromate primer. One is fore of the wing and one is aft of the wing. The main spar is reinforced for the more powerful PT6 engines, and depending on the condition of the airframe, additional work like replacing the wing skins may be done to take the Heron airframe to zero-time condition. A side view comparing the de Havilland Heron and the Saunders ST-27. The 8-foot fuselage stretch, a longer nose cone, and a squared-off rudder and vertical fin give the ST-27 a modern, sleeker look. A side passenger door on the right side is added. The ST-27 does its maiden flight over Montreal on May 28, 1969. Saunders would need a test pilot for the ST-27 certification program. Saunders hires Rich Kersey as test pilot. Kersey also signs on as the director of Saunders Aircraft. Rich Kersey had joined the RCF in 1944 and served in World War II. In 1951, Kersey graduates from the Empire Test Pilot School in Farnborough, England. Kersey does acceptance test flights for the RCF on the CF-100 and was a CF-100 chase pilot on the Arrow program. In 1964, Rich Kersey develops a heart condition. He cannot fly at high altitudes and retires from the RCF and would become the general manager of Canadian Aero Services, an aerial surveying company. Kersey would then join Saunders Aircraft in 1969. On October 14, 1969, on a ST-27 certification testing flight, Rich Kersey lands gear up. There is major damage to the engines, props, nacelles, and the fuselage bottom. Shown on the screen is the damage inspection report from Saunders to DOT. New engines and props must be purchased and installed, and sheet metal must be repaired and replaced. The test program is set back months. Dave Saunders will later say, "I would have fired Kersey for the gear-up landing, but I needed a test pilot." A second Heron is purchased and converted to an ST-27. A flashy yellow and orange paint scheme is applied. Saunders workers nicknamed the plane the Yellow Submarine from the Beatles song of the same name. A May 1970 sales trip is planned to the UK and Europe. Additional temporary fuel tanks are put in the passenger compartment to make the ocean crossing. The trip generates lots of interest, but no sales are made. The economy enters a recession in 1970 and hits the North American aviation industry hard. The waning of the Vietnam War brought a sharp fall-off in military aircraft orders, and the cutbacks of the Apollo program led to a similar fall-off in NASA spending. Boeing has just started the 747 program and is on the verge of bankruptcy. Saunders Aircraft is not immune from this recession. Local investment money has dried up. No ST-27 sales have been made, and Saunders Aircraft has had trouble making payroll. Dave Saunders is selling blocks of his Saunders shares to keep the company afloat. August 27, 1970. Headline news in Manitoba. The federal government announces that Canadian Forces Base Gimli and Rivers are to close. Gimli Base expects to lose about 700 jobs. CFB Gimli was a thriving base. Millions had just been spent on repaving the runways and on new housing units. About 100 T-33s and Tudor aircraft are based in Gimli for advanced flight training. In the 1960s, there were even discussions that CFB Winnipeg may close and move those operations to Gimli. Manitoba's first NDP government was first elected in June of 1969 under Premier Ed Schreier. Ed Schreier had started taking flying lessons in 1966. Local school teacher John Godfrey wins the Gimli riding for the NDP by only 239 votes. The province's NDP government are determined to stave off the effects of the base closing job losses. Saunders investors are worried that Saunders Aircraft may go bankrupt. They ask the Quebec government for financial help and are turned down. The investors hear that the Manitoba government is looking for industry to offset the base job losses. Saunders investors approach the Manitoba government and a deal is struck. The Manitoba government announces on September 25, 1970, that Saunders Aircraft will move to Gimli. Dave Saunders is not in favor of moving to Gimli. Dave hopes the Manitoba deal would buy him time to refinance the company and keep it in Montreal. Dave knew Gimli from his T-33 training days. Saunders called Gimli a cold, desolate place and knew that Gimli's World War II hangars would be cold and drafty in the winter. Saunders also had major concerns about finding sufficient aviation workers in Gimli. On September 16, 1970, Saunders Aircraft receives the UK type certificate for the ST-27. On the left is Arthur Lefley, chief designer at ATEL. Center is Saunders Vice President Reg Kersey. On the right is Jack Harbottle of the UK Air Registration Board. In October of 1970, Saunders Vice President Reg Kersey and Production Manager Stan Zibb fly into Gimli to check out the base. A Saunders-owned de Havilland Heron is used for the trip. January 1971, Saunders sells two ST-27 to Aerolíneas Centrales de Colombia, or ACES for short. The ST-27s are sold for $400,000 each. Colombia's DOT will accept a British type certificate and register the aircraft. The ST-27s are to be built and delivered by the end of 1971. Saunders asked the federal government export arm to finance the sales, same as de Havilland Canada received for the foreign Twin Otter sales. The feds declined. They feel that ACES is too risky. The Manitoba Development Corporation must loan ACES the money to keep the ST-27 sale afloat. Dave Saunders, still opposing the move to Gimli, is voted out as president of Saunders Aircraft in April of 1971 and replaced by former airline executive William Kelly. Kelly comes from the bankrupt Mohawk Airlines in upstate New York. Dave Saunders then sells his remaining shares in Saunders Aircraft. May 14, 1971, Ottawa approves the ST-27 type certificate. This means the ST-27 can now be used in commercial service in Canada. In June of 1971, the federal government sells the Gimli base to the province for $1. The Gimli sets up the Gimli Industrial Park Corporation. The full Saunders operation is now at Gimli at this time. Saunders sets up in hangars 4 and 5. Hangar 5 is a large double hangar on the right and used for parts fabrication and the ST-27 build. Hangar 4 is used for flight operations and for aircraft maintenance. Here we have a look inside Hangar 5. 3 de Havilland Herons are under conversion to ST-27s at the back. The fuselages would sit in cradles to the insert of the fuselage extensions. As you can see, the outside walls are uninsulated and have single-pane windows. During the winter, it was too cold to bend aircraft aluminum, so many electric space heaters had to be brought in to warm up the workspaces. Saunders was having trouble finding aviation workers in the Gimli area for Saunders to hire. Only a handful of unemployed aircraft tradesmen were willing to commute from Winnipeg to Gimli. Saunders is on a deadline to complete the ACES ST-27s. So in September 1971, Saunders hires a UK job shop firm called Welltrade to supply 48 skilled aviation workers for 6 months. The Welltrade workers are housed in the former base hospital. The Manitoba Conservative Opposition government criticized this as taxpayers' money used to pay foreign workers while Manitobans are unemployed. The local Gimli Chamber of Commerce would hold a welcome to Gimli party for the British workers. After a while, complaints about the British workers' rowdy nightlife are heard about town. Saunders also cannot get qualified aviation engineers to move to Gimli. Saunders contracts with Aviation Technical Services, or ATS, from Los Angeles, California to provide engineering services. A young engineer, Lane Helms, from ATS volunteers to go to Gimli on a monthly rotation basis. Helms does not like living in Los Angeles and is willing to give Gimli a try. In January of 1972, Helms makes his first trip to Gimli. Helms recalls Rich Kersey picking him up at the Winnipeg airport. It is cold and dark. After 30 minutes of driving north to Gimli, Helms naively asks Kersey if Gimli is near the North Pole. Helms does a monthly commute from Los Angeles to Gimli, either flying commercially or flying a Cessna 182. Flying the 182 from Los Angeles to Gimli took 9 hours, an hour longer than flying commercially. Helms and his family would permanently move to Gimli in the fall of 1972. Saunders is still dealing with a shortage of skilled aviation workers. So in March 1972, Saunders Aircraft and the federal government through Canada Manpower set up the Saunders Sheet Metal Training School in Gimli. Job training ads are posted in local newspapers. Saunders will get paid $2.20 an hour. The minimum wage at that time was $1.75. The training is housed in a vacant church at the base. Here we have a look inside the Saunders Sheet Metal Training School. Manitoba Development Corporation continues to loan more money to Saunders Aircraft to keep the company afloat. By June of 1972, the loan total is now $9.6 million plus interest. And MDC has a major equity position and takes over Saunders Aircraft and makes changes. William Kelly resigns and Rich Kersey becomes president. Thomas Zout, who is managing the Flyer bus plant in Winnipeg under MDC control also, becomes the Saunders managing director in addition to looking after the bus plant. Around the same time, an MDC staffer issues a memo to the Gimli Industrial Park manager suggesting it would be advantageous for Saunders Aircraft to relocate to Winnipeg. However, that MDC memo is quickly quashed. Also in June, Saunders Aircraft is informed that the ST-27 will not get FAA certification. The FAA has been lobbied to deny the ST-27 bilateral type certificate, and Saunders is told that a full FAA certification program is needed for the ST-27. Also in the summer of 1972, MDC considers winding up Saunders Aircraft. However, after consideration with the provincial government, MDC gives Saunders the go-ahead to build an all-new ST-27 to meet the FAA FAR 25 standards. This new program will be called the ST-27B. An existing ST-27 aircraft goes back into the plant to be modified to the ST-27B specs and will become the FAR 25 certification flight test aircraft. In December of 1972, MDC Saunders asked MDC for a $2.8 million loan to buy the rights to the Fairchild Husky aircraft and set up a Husky manufacturing line in Gimli. MDC does a study of the bush plane market and finds little sales potential for the Husky, and MDC does not approve the loan. Meanwhile, the Saunders Sheet Metal School obtains a crash Husky as a school rebuild project. Here we see the rebuilt Husky Golf Charlie Yankee Victor ready for its maiden flight. As MDC loans Saunders more money, scrutiny on these loans increases with focused media coverage. In April 1973, the Winnipeg Tribune runs this half-page story. How much time does Saunders need? In June of 1973, a provincial election is held and sees the NDP win a second majority term. Gimli NDP John Godfrey wins by only 30 votes. The election win for the NDP government means that financial support for Saunders Aircraft will continue for the time being. In July of 1974, the new ST-27B build program is renamed to the ST-28 program. The ST-27 that is being modified to the new build design will still be called the ST-27B. On July 17, 1974, the ST-27B converted aircraft makes its maiden flight and starts flight testing for the ST-28 FAR 25 certification program. Saunders now has 400 employees on its Gimli payroll. Lane Helms, chief engineer at Saunders Aircraft, heads up the structural part of the ST-28 certification program. A partial ST-28 airframe is built to do tests on the new fail-safe wing spar. This 2012 photo shows the ST-28 test frame still sitting at the Gimli Airport. By November of 1974, loans to Saunders Aircraft now reach $21 million. Premier Schreier is facing more criticism on the loans to Saunders Aircraft and thus transfers the Saunders portfolio to fiery Cabinet Minister Sidney Green. Green is shown in his November 1974 Free Press cartoon. The free flight models labeled Saunders Aircraft and the box of elastic bands are labeled $21.3 million. During this time, the federal government buys de Havilland Aircraft of Canada and Canadair and injects millions of dollars into each company. The province and Saunders ask, what about us? The feds offer up a $3 million grant to the Manitoba and Saskatchewan governments to purchase two ST-27s and set up an air service called SkyWest that would fly between Winnipeg, Brandon, Yorkton, and Dauphin, a route that had been dropped by Transair as being unprofitable. Manitoba and Saskatchewan cannot agree who will manage the air service, and thus the $3 million grant is cancelled. Meanwhile, Saunders Aircraft has spent thousands of dollars in getting the two ST-27s outfitted for SkyWest. Cash flow is now getting very tight for Saunders Aircraft. This slide shows a book cover written by Herb Schultz called A View from the Ledge, or the Legislature. On the bottom left is Herb Schultz, on the top right is Ed Schreier. Schultz is Premier Ed Schreier's executive assistant and also Schreier's brother-in-law. Schreier's wife Lily and Herb are sister and brother. In early 1975, Schultz is having lunch with Tom Burness, an old University of Winnipeg classmate. Burness is an assistant to Federal Defense Minister James Richardson of Winnipeg. Burness tells Schultz that the ST-27 will not be certified by DOT and for the NDP to drop Saunders Aircraft. Burness's reasoning is that the recession has affected major U.S. aircraft manufacturing firms and they are now looking to build smaller commuter aircraft. Burnett says those U.S. firms do not want competition from Saunders Aircraft. Or perhaps it is that the federal government does not want sales of de Havilland aircraft to the USA affected. Schultz tells Schreier of the conversation. Schreier finds the Burnett statement incredulous. Saunders management had heard rumors of de Havilland Canada influence at DOT. Personnel from Saunders Aircraft would visit DOT in Ottawa to review the ST-28 certification progress. They would find DOT had not reviewed many of the ST-28 certification reports submitted by Saunders. Saunders feels like they are getting nowhere with DOT on the ST-28 certification program. In May of 1975, the 13th ST-27 is built and sold to On Air based out of Thunder Bay. On June 21, 1975, the Manitoba government announces that they will not loan Saunders Aircraft any more money. The loans now are at $31 million. Minister Sidney Green gives Saunders Aircraft 4 options: sell the aircraft plant in Gimli, go into partnership with another aircraft manufacturer, go ahead alone with private funding, or close down altogether and take the losses. 160 workers are laid off immediately, with more to follow. Saunders will try to get the ST-28 completed and certified with the cash they have on hand, and with any income Saunders may get from ST-27 leases or sales. A new Air Canada maintenance base in Winnipeg was a major election promise of federal Liberal Cabinet Minister James Richardson. With Saunders winding down, in October 1975, Air Canada announces that they will build a new $12 million maintenance hangar in Winnipeg. Coincidence or politics? You decide. Despite the bleak news, staff at Saunders Aircraft work all out to complete the ST-28. Some workers that had been laid off in June stayed and worked without pay. December 1975 sees the completion and rollout of the ST-28. On December 12, 1975, Reg Kersey takes the ST-28 up for its successful maiden flight. Many Saunders employees believed that once the ST-28 flew, someone would step in and save the ST-28 program. Beechcraft Aircraft and Piper Aircraft are approached to buy the ST-28 project, and both turn it down. The remaining staff is laid off. A few key Saunders employees are kept on, providing ST-28 product support. The plant is mothballed and Saunders Aircraft goes into receivership. In the June 1977 provincial election, the Conservatives defeat the NDP. The Conservatives want the business of Saunders Aircraft wrapped up quickly and directs the receiver, Price Waterhouse, to sell off Saunders by tender. In January 1979, the Conservative government accepts a bid of $780,000 from Autonomy Airways of Peterborough, Ontario, for 10 ST-27 aircraft and related parts. The deal includes Autonomy providing their own ST-27 product support. The ST-27B and the ST-28 aircraft are not part of the sale, as these 2 aircraft are uncertified and cannot be used in commercial service. These 2 aircraft are stripped of any useful parts and left at Gimli. Anything else not part of the Autonomy sale is sold at public auction on May 10, 1979. The Saunders Aircraft epitaph. The ST-27s kept flying. Autonomy Air was brought out by City Express in 1984, and the ST-27s would fly until 1990 on Canadian routes. Reg Kersey, only 52 years old, died suddenly of cancer in 1978. Some say his spirit was broken once Saunders Aircraft went under. The Royal Western Canada Aviation Museum requested and was gifted the ST-28. The museum stored the ST-28 in Gimli. In 2014, the museum scrapped the ST-28. About 80 Saunders employees that were Saunders Sheet Metal School graduates and former employees found work at the Winnipeg Air Canada maintenance hangar. Dave Saunders eventually moved to California and continued doing aeronautical engineering and sell his Beechcraft Wingspire reinforcement kit, the Saunders Strap. Dave Saunders passed away in 2019. Lane Helm started making wood furniture and kitchen cabinets in Gimli until he could get re-established in the aviation business. Helms will start Aero Consultant Services, or ACS. Helms sold ACS in 2008 for millions of dollars and is now retired. Helms lived in Gimli until 2012 and moved to the Birds Hill area. Former Saunders employees speak very fondly of the company that gave them an opportunity to start an aviation career. As one local Saunders employee stated, "Before Saunders Aircraft, all we had to choose from after high school graduation was farming or fishing." Surviving Saunders Aircraft ST-27s. ST-27 number 9 is on display at the Canadian Bushplane Museum in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. And ST-27 number 6 is in peace and in storage at the Western Canada Aviation Storage Compound at the St. Andrews Airport in Manitoba. You can find more about Saunders Aircraft on our Saunders Aircraft Facebook group. Do you have any Saunders stories or information? Email me at kenkalnick@gmail.com. My email address is shown on this line. This is the end of the Saunders presentation. Thank you for listening.